Hello everybody, welcome back. This is another Cultured Swine minicast, and shout out to my cousin Micah who came up with a better name for these things. From now on, these will be known as piglets. I hope I don't have to connect too many dots for you there. I just thought it was super cool, and I'm really kind of angry at myself for not coming up with it personally. But credit where credit's due. Micah Schultz, big ups to Brooklyn. Not that he lives in Brooklyn, but I've always just wanted to say that. So this is the Cultured Swine Piglet minicast from now on. And first off, gonna apologize for the condition of my voice. I cannot get rid of this cold, so I might sound a little stuffy. But I'm hoping it adds a timbre, a little deep. Oh yeah, but doubtful. Probably just sounds like I'm nasally and sick, which I am. This disease just won't go away, and I'm positive I have some kind of Ebola-based swine flu type SARS bird flu thing happening. I don't know. I just wish it would go away. Anyway, so yeah, this is a Piglet cast. I have another story I'd like to read for you. This one is about an experience I had in Turkey. This happened in 2002, February, March. I believe it was later early spring. We had got to Turkey in 2002, February, and this was off of my very first deployment in the Navy. At the time, it was still, we were covering Operation Northern Watch, which, without getting too deep into it, we were basically covering a certain parallel in Iraq, enforcing no-fly zones. This was prior to, I thought I closed everything. Sorry about that. I got an email. So anyway, this was prior to the Iraqi freedom, which happened later that year, I believe, is when that kicked off, or next 2003. We were, I think, Operation Enduring Freedom was a thing already, because this was just after 9/11. I'm not sure if they had officially named it at that point, but either way, we were in Turkey, awesome place, and this doesn't really have a lot to do with the military. This story. This is another one I've been thinking about submitting to like a short story or a short story. What do you call them? Memoir type thing. Again, they have a lot of those overseas, and I have been looking for some stateside here just for. To keep myself honest. But okay, this one is called Mustafa. This actually happened. Again, some embellishments do occur, but for all intents and purposes, this story actually happened as written, and it's one of my best memories of deployments, and I'd like to share it with everybody. So. This story is called Mustafa, and I hope you like it. Mustafa will be here in a few minutes. You guys have cash? My friend Jason and I exchanged glances. Yeah, we got cash. Good, because they only take cash out there. And you didn't get Turkish cash, did you? They like American money. We have plenty of American money, I said. Jason and I were in the Falcon Bar, talking with the owner, an expat named Ronnie. Ronnie came to Turkey about 7 years prior when he was in the Air Force. He liked it so much that he decided to stay and open a business when his enlistment was up. The night before, Jason and I were in the Falcon complaining to Ronnie that there was nothing there in Turkey that we couldn't do back in the States. Look, you guys come back here in the morning, he said. I'll hook you up with a guy I know. He'll show you the real Turkey. So, there we were, a little hungover the next morning, waiting for the mystery Turk named Mustafa. I was a little nervous. This was only a few months after September 11th, and there was a really real threat against U.S. military personnel everywhere in that part of the world. I brought this up to Ronnie. Nah, don't worry, man. Mustafa's good to go. You guys shouldn't end up getting taken hostage. Shouldn't? What do you... Ronnie was almost choking because he was laughing so hard. But before he could answer, the whole bar went dark. Jason and I turned to the doorway, which until about 2 seconds prior had morning sunlight pouring through it. Now there was no light coming through the door. Instead, there was the largest man I'd ever seen in real life. He was a mountain. He was what mountains wanted to be when they grew up. Ronnie said, "Here he is. Guys, this is Mustafa." Mustafa lumbered into the room. The bar, which moments ago seemed quite spacious, seemed to close in around his incredible mass. His enormous head, which was covered in a thick mane of jet black hair, sat on top of the massive expanse that was his shoulders. It did not appear that he had a neck. His massive arms looked like fur-covered sequoia trees and ended in hands the size of catcher's mitts. He had a pinky ring on his right hand that looked like it was about the size of a snow tire off a 52 Buick. "These guys are the guys I told you about," Ronnie said to him. Mustafa looked at the two of us. His eyes were deep set beneath a thick unibrow that extended across his entire forehead. He drew deeply on a cigarette that was nestled in the corner of his thick lips and exhaled a plume of exotic-smelling smoke over our heads. "You have cash? American?" he growled. Speechless, Jason and I could only look up at him and nod. Mustafa looked first at Jason, then at me, then looked back up at Ronnie for a brief second, then back to me, then back to Jason. "Car is this way," was all he said, spinning on his heel and stalking out the door. A little wary, Jason and I followed Mustafa out into the street. Walking the streets of Turkey is a little like walking down a carnival midway. Salesmen shouting from every direction, each one louder and more pushy than the next, trying to lure customers into their stores. Usually that's how it is. That day nobody was bothering us. We passed a carpet salesman who was known for physically restraining passing customers. That day he stood up when Mustafa passed and stayed absolutely quiet. It was amazing, like walking down the street with Don Corleone. We followed Mustafa to the smallest car I had ever seen. It was a flimsy, grime-coated white compact that looked like it was built in a long-defunct Eastern Bloc country. Seeing Mustafa fold his bulk behind the steering wheel might have been funny, if we weren't so afraid of offending him. He glared at us over the filthy driver's side window that was half rolled down. "Get in car." "Where are you taking us?" Jason asked. "I take you shopping, then to barber," he replied curtly. We both looked around. We had both been briefed on safety in this country, and getting in a car with a mysterious Turkish giant was definitely a no-no. Still, we wanted to see the real Turkey. Looking at each other over the tiny vehicle, we came to a silent resolution. Nodding in agreement, we got in the car. Mustafa drove like a man possessed. There didn't seem to be any traffic rules whatsoever. We swung in and out of oncoming traffic, passing cars and narrowly avoiding pedestrians. Our world was suddenly a cacophony of blaring horns, screeching tires, and men shouting in a caustic blend of Turkish, Arabic, and Russian. My foot kept pumping an imaginary brake pedal as Mustafa sent the car careening into a crowded open-air market. My mind was racing, imagining the international incident that was sure to unfold. Headlines would read, 2 American sailors involved in massive hit and run, hundreds dead. But then suddenly the car was still. I opened my eyes. The car was perfectly parallel parked. Mustafa was already out of the car. Snapping his keys into his pocket, he said, "This way." Jason and I stumbled out onto the street on unsteady legs. Mustafa was standing on the sidewalk next to a carpet salesman, who looked like a slightly smaller version of Mustafa himself. "My brother Kamal. You buy carpet from him." Neither Jason nor I had planned on buying a carpet that day, but the menacing glare from Mustafa seemed to suggest that it would be in our best interest to at least look over the merchandise. It turned out Kamal was a wonderful salesman. Like all business transactions in Turkey, we bargained back and forth on price until an agreement was made. His master stroke of salesmanship, though, was having his mammoth brother stand in the doorway of his shop so we couldn't leave. They should teach this tactic in business school. It is simple and 100% effective. Once we paid for our carpets and arranged to have them shipped back to the States, Mustafa seemed to warm to us. We said our goodbyes to Kamal, who handed Jason and I each a business card. "Tell friends," was all he said. It seemed more like a command than a request, though. Now that we had our business out of the way, we could enjoy the rest of the day. Mustafa had taken us to Adana, which was about 30 miles from Incirlik, where we started. Even though we were the only non-Turkish people in sight, we felt very comfortable in our surroundings. Part of the ease came from being escorted by Mustafa. Even with his gruff appearance and caustic attitude, we knew that we really had nothing to fear while we were with him. What we didn't know at that point was that he still had plans for us and that we still had more business to conduct. Mustafa led us to a small barber shop at the end of a long, nearly empty street. We each took a seat, and the fastidious barbers promptly began applying steaming towels to our faces in preparation for a shave. I'd never had a straight razor shave before and was enjoying the experience very much when Mustafa suddenly began yelling at a small boy in the corner of the barber shop. The boy jumped to his feet and ran into the back room, returning moments later with a small television. After placing the TV in front of Mustafa, he turned it on to a horse race. Mustafa insisted that we bet on the races. $5, no problem. You pick blue horse, is good horse. Mustafa seemed like the type of guy who would know a thing or two about the ponies, so Jason and I agreed, and placed our bets on the blue horse. Then Mustafa seemed to consider the horses for a long moment. "I bet red horse," he said. "Is better than blue horse." My barber insisted that he hold my money until after the race. I was tempted to be insulted that he would think I might not pay up, but it turns out the man holding a razor in close proximity to vital blood vessels could also be quite persuasive. This was yet another demonstration of flawless Turkish business acumen. When my horse inevitably lost, everyone had a good laugh, especially Mustafa when he got my $5. As it turned out, Mustafa had a really good day, winning every race we bet on. By the time our faces were shaved and our hair was cut, Mustafa was about $60 richer. As we settled up with the barber, he handed us each a business card. "Tell friends," he said. Again, it sounded more like a command than a request. As we stepped out of the barber shop, a taxi came to a screeching stop in front of us. "My house is here in Adana," Mustafa said to us. "You take cab back to base." This wasn't part of the deal, but we weren't about to argue with him. We thanked Mustafa and watched him walk away, the crowds of people partying before him like the Red Sea. We got into the cab and Jason asked the driver how much it was going to cost us to get back to Incirlik. $50, no problem, he said. We sighed and agreed to the price. The driver chuckled and lit up a cigarette. As the car filled with the sweet-smelling cigarette smoke, I looked over at our driver. He was very big with a unibrow and no neck. He reminded me of someone I knew. "You aren't related to Mustafa, are you?" I asked. He looked at me through the rearview mirror, took another long drag from his cigarette, laughed once more, and tore off down the road like a bat out of hell. All I could do was hold on for dear life, and as I sat back in the back of the cab, pumping my invisible brake pedal and praying to God for mercy, I reminded myself that if I ever got back to base alive, I would have to really thank Ronnie for our experience in the real Turkey. So that's it. That's my story about Mustafa. I think about that guy a lot. I really wonder what he's up to these days, if he's still around or what's going on. If he's still fleecing unsuspecting American servicemen for carpets and whatnot. It was actually a really fun experience. It did cost us quite a bit of money that day, but back then, we were young and didn't really care about how we spent our money. Excuse me. So yeah, it was an awesome experience, and I wrote this story when I took a creative writing class a while back, and we had to do sort of like a little memoir type thing, and I like it. This Wednesday, I have a guest coming in for a full-blown Cultured Swine podcast. It's the day before Thanksgiving, and I got John Eliason coming in from Porch Front Studios. He's a videographer local here in town, does amazing work. And he's also a cool guy. I like talking to him. He's got, different views on stuff than me, and I always think that's fun to talk to somebody that sees the world a little differently than you. We get along really well. They're not to say that we don't agree on anything. We both like good whiskey and good drinks, and we enjoy spending time talking. So I think that's going to be an interesting podcast. We're really looking forward to it. What's next? Well, Thursday is Thanksgiving. My family's having Thanksgiving on Wednesday, though. That Wednesday night. We do something a little different. We don't do traditional Thanksgiving food on Thanksgiving. It's something we started about 5 years ago. Just as we could have the turkey and stuffing and everything, but why? Who says we got to have those traditional foods on that day? So we always try something a little different. This year I'm making a big Italian feast. I make a really good spaghetti and meatballs type dish with the traditional Italian Sunday gravy. It takes me about 4 or 5 hours to cook, in addition to the about 2 hours of prep to make it all happen with the sausage and the prosciutto and the meatballs and all that good stuff. And maybe I'll try to videotape some of that when I'm video it. There's no tape involved anymore. When I'm preparing it, maybe that'll be kind of fun, and I could post that on the Facebook page. See if anybody's interested in that. I know you'd be interested in tasting it because it's probably one of the better things on this planet. You're just gonna have to take my word for it, though. What else? What else we got? I think that's it. The holidays are upon us. And so once we get through Thanksgiving, we're going to be going hot and heavy into Christmas. And I'm trying to line up some Yuletide guests for our podcast. There's a lot of good stuff happening in town lately, too, as far as giving and charitable acts. And I think we need to talk about some of those, too. Maybe we'll have a full episode dedicated to all the good stuff happening in town, and just how people are kind of trying to get past all of the the caustic just bad vibes being thrown out around lately, and people are really stepping up around here to make it nice and happy for everybody around the holiday times. I always try to end this podcast with saying something positive. Be good to each other, be nice to each other, be decent. And I think that's really starting to shine through in this town, and I'm hopefully nationally. So that's it. This is the Piglet, brought to you by Cultured Swine Podcast. This is the Piglet minicast. And just want to encourage everybody to be good to each other and do something positive. That's it. Peace.